So, I guess where we got to start is, hey, good morning, Gary Wilkinson. Right, right there, bang early. He's already waiting for the show to appear and said good morning, gents. So there we go. Thank you, Gary. Welcome to the show. And we'll start where we didn't go yesterday. Was $135 million upgrade to the Adam Beck 2 transformer station, and apparently they're updating about 5 transformers um, for um, hydropower around the province, which are supposed to make these stations more efficient, because some of these transformers were installed as long ago as the 50s or 60s.
Yeah, the Sir Adam Beck's a very old power station. So what they're doing is upgrading. They did a massive upgrading uh, when they did the Big Becky tunnel. They twinned two different operations.
This is a different type of upgrade. This is circuit breaker upgrades, which always lead to greater, I'm assuming, lead to greater efficiency.
Well, the demand for power is going to be very high, particularly if we start to switch to electric cars, which is still yet
well, that's
yet
still
to happen because and of course the biggest.
And how many people with gas cars are going to be parking electric cars for for a while?
Yeah, well, the whole point is, like, we are all set up to make electric cars. If it doesn't go, if electric cars do not take off, we're in big trouble, because we made massive investments in that area. And Metaphysical Mike is here, and so is GP 881 Slick. And Mike Cushman, Metaphysical Mike, has sent us an update from the ministry about the Welland River slur. No, I didn't have a chance to. I just looked at it this morning, so perhaps we'll talk about it tomorrow.
But I think that
Mike's on the case. Metaphysical Mike is
Dave. I think that would be appropriate to talk about Mike's response yesterday. I didn't get a full chance to read it either. What's going on, Dave? Looks like Dave is frozen. It is unusual on this, but it does happen. I suppose 7 o'clock in the morning is that time when kind of everybody's, Dave's frozen, absolutely solidly frozen. Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about this Adam Beck. Basically, Adam Beck transformer station, they have just recently completed an upgrade of $135 million worth of circuit breakers, right? So that's what's been going on. They had this Stephen Lecce, the minister in charge of energy, came down to announce this, and alongside him was the ever-present Niagara West Conservative MPP Sam Oosterhoff, who is Associate Energy Minister of Energy, and also Niagara-on-the-Lake Lord Mayor Gary Zalepa, other mayors, including Mr. Diodati, of course. All right. All getting in on the act of opening these, the fact that they've done a massive circuit breaker upgrade. Lecce basically is talking about the demand for energy means the province is being forced to work with speed and urgency to build more affordable and reliable energy, and that will include nuclear and renewable sources. There we
go. My internet tripped off for a little while.
Your internet died. Yeah, so I was just talking about how these celebrities, these politicians were here talking about demand for more energy means the province is being forced to work, with speed and urgency to build more affordable, reliable energy that will include nuclear and other renewable sources. Yep. Did you freeze again? So, Dave.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time. The connection's not good here.
You're having a hard time getting a stable internet by the looks of it, stable streaming internet. Okay. Okay. All right. So basically, there's a whole kind of thing here is about this replaced equipment that was originally installed in 1955. So it's more than it's more than it's nearly 70 years old. So pretty pretty long long going. So Dave, we lost him again. We lost him again. Looks like he's got internet trouble. Right. And they're basically calling this critical system. And the idea about these new circuit breakers means less maintenance, etc., etc. All right. So supposed to be greater efficiencies, etc., through that. And I guess that helps them bring more power, have the power generation online for longer. All right. Comments. Yes. Dave. Not here. Yeah. He keeps freezing up. So he'll get back to us, that's for sure. Okay, so I'm going to move on from that to the question about retired Vice-Admiral Haydn Edmundson found not guilty in an Ottawa court. Now, we talked about this about I guess 2 years ago, maybe 3, when he was put up for a committee by the prime minister, and then these allegations raised their ugly head, and he had to step down. And furthermore, he retired, so he had an ungraceful end to his career. Accused of sexually assaulting a woman more than 30 years ago, was found not guilty in an Ottawa courtroom this past Monday. So he elected to actually have his trial in front of a judge alone. So, and the judge basically concluded that it seemed highly improbable and implausible that the facts as outlined by the complainant could have conceivably occurred. He rendered the decision in the Ontario Court of Justice because the case was being tried on this occasion by a judge alone. And that's actually something that any accused can do. They can elect to actually have their trial tried by a judge alone. And I guess that what it was is in things like rape trials and that, or sexual assault trials, it's a lot easier to actually, the judge is going to be a lot less emotional. See whether Dave's able to get through. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Yeah, I'm having internet disruptions this morning for some reason.
Yeah. So yeah, he was found guilty before they did anything. That's the problem. We were moved on to retired Vice-Admiral Haydn Edmundson, who was found not guilty on Monday. He elected for a judge only trial, and the fact that the judge only trial, I think, took some of the motion out of the court case, and the judge was finding upon the evidence, the evidence alone, saying the Crown's evidence simply didn't satisfy the threshold that's required for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's just too many problems with their case.
Yeah, and I think here that the complaints probably by the plaintiff didn't measure up. I don't really like the idea that the Canadian government dropped this guy like a hot potato right away.
Yeah. No, I don't like that idea as well. He was set for a government career in, I forget what the committee was, but he was heading, I think, a critical defense committee, and then he was dropped like a hot potato.
Yeah, wasn't he on going to be running part of the response to COVID too? I don't know. He was on the rise. His career was on the rise, and it got disrupted by this, and the government dropped him like a hot potato.
Yeah,
and they were acting as if he was guilty before he was tried.
Yeah,
and he was smart. He got Greenspan, who was a lawyer, was a very good lawyer, and anyway. The complainant said that he had sexually assaulted her and all that. However, there wasn't really a whole lot of substantial witnesses. The judge just didn't figure it held up. And we remember the trial against Gian Gomeshi, who got off in his trial for where there was actually sex involved. In that particular case, there was no doubt that sex was involved, but it turned out to be nothing could be proven that he used sex as a means of getting what he wanted. So this is a particular case. She says a couple of days before the alleged sexual assault, she had outbursts when she went to wake Edmundson up for a night and found him lying there naked.
But
she talks about bunkmates that probably weren't there and other things. I don't know.
He was already he, as an officer, he wouldn't have had bunkmates. He would have been he would have had his own cabin, right? And she found him lying naked in the bed. Well, people do sleep naked, right?
Yeah, and I don't think this is a very, very important case because this ruined his career and put stains on his on him. And I don't know in retrospect if it was true or not true. They and that's never really determined here. There's just not enough evidence to say that it actually did happen.
Yeah. And he was
Weber cast doubts on Bayou's testimony, saying that if her attractiveness had distracted the male crew, would it have made sense to assign her to a role where she
saying that okay, so Weber cast out on her testimony saying
Edmundson that had a roommate during the time Bayou said she had her outburst. He said as well, he noted that the court also heard Bayou identified two people being Edmundson's roommates. Both of them
investigators later ruled out. Crucial issues there, right? And when the prosecutor's major witness's testimony is proven to be weak and perhaps not true, it is definitely problematic for the prosecution, right? And there was no. And that whole point about there being any proof that he had a roommate, as an officer, he unlikely would not have had a roommate. Most officers would have their own bunks, would have their own rooms on most ships, to my knowledge. And I might be wrong, but that's what I understood. And okay, so there we go. See if we can get him back again. Hey, Dave, how are you?
Connection problems.
Yeah. So he was treated guilty before they did anything, right? And this is how Canadians end up losing money from lawsuits because of jumping the gun. Well, it's not a lawsuit. This would have been a criminal. It's not a lawsuit. This is a criminal action. So he was on trial for sexual assault. Right, Dave, you're gone again, aren't you? There we go. Okay, so either the events she described never happened, or they happened in a manner that bore very little resemblance to the act that she described, is what the judge basically said, right? And that's an important point, is that that's an important point as to why why you hold a trial before a judge, because you hold a trial before a judge because he's going to take the emotion out of the situation, right? But I will expect this one to go to be appealed. But I'll also say that I don't expect that it will be. I expect that it'll also be, the appeal will be denied. All right. So moving on. Suspicious packages were sent to 6 states on Monday. However, there's no reports of any packages containing hazardous material. They were sent to the secretaries of state and state election offices in Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Tennessee, Wyoming, and Oklahoma. This latest scare comes as early voting has started in many states, 2 months ahead of the actual election day, which is what they do in America. Well, they do it here as well. I think it's a good idea to do early voting, because there's a lot of people who can get to the polls early that might well not be available on the day. So basically, in Iowa, Secretary of State Paul Pate said in a statement after the evacuation of that we immediately reported the incident per protocols, and that the police got involved. Right, same in most of the other states. And in Topeka, Kansas, the fire department crews found several pieces of mail with an unknown substance on them, and they did a field test, but they found that there's no hazardous material. So, probably somebody shaking flour all over the parcel to cause confusion. Right. Oklahoma, the state election board received suspicious envelope in the mail containing a multi-page document and a white powdery substance. Right. So similar there. Right. That's kind of where we sit with that particular thing. Moving. Okay. So. Okay. Get this one in the right order. Donald Trump actually is looking to turn on a very large faucet and get a Canadian fresh water. Yeah, he's welcome to try. We'll give him fresh water, $200 a liter. How about that? How about that kind of price? Hey, Dave.
Yeah, I had to use my phone to get back on.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that. Okay. Okay, so I got to this question about Trump wants to turn on a very large faucet to get Canadian fresh water in the US. Well, I said $200 a liter. How about that? We'll give him his fresh water, but it'll cost him a pretty penny or two. Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly don't understand. Well, he's making promises to California, and this is not the first time, nor will it be the last time. that a politician in the United States wants to divert water from Canada into California and other places in the United States. But I think what he's there, he's got his geography confused there. So the only viable way they could do that is reroute part of the Columbia River, which flows in Canada, then into the United States. And what I think he's trying to assume that Canada will divert more water into the Columbia River, so that more of it can be diverted off from Washington State, and then make its way into California. I think that's probably what he was trying to talk about, but I don't know. He thinks he's got a really good idea there. He was very happy to get the question from reporters about it. And but you know what? That is a continuous thing going on, and they say in the future that water will be the new oil. The freshwater reserves are going to be what oil is today, because of the amount that is consumed and the amount that is required for agriculture.
Yeah, exactly. The whole thing about water, exactly, the need for it. Essentially, what he is talking about is that to redirect water from Canada down to California. Essentially, we know that there are ice caps on the Rocky Mountains, and all of those mountains up the west coast of the Americas actually generate quite a large amount of water, because they force the air stream up over before heading into the rest of the US. And there is a lot of water falls in the mountains, that's for sure. But that water has to effectively be dammed and trapped for use, and which is, big infrastructure project. And whether, essentially, you wouldn't really bring water from the Canadian Rockies down to California.
No, but there have been some extraordinary ideas. Like there was one idea of actually taking James Bay and damming it off across a certain part of it, so that the fresh water could displace the seawater that's in James Bay, and then use James Bay as a reservoir for transporting water and also making power, but mostly transport. And this was a plan devised. I remember being discussed in Mulroney's years.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a pie in the sky idea at the time, but because of the future demand for water in the United States, and probably as far down as Mexico, basically, but especially the United States, they felt that might be a viable idea to actually cut off James Bay from the rest of the Hudson's Bay, or at least parts of it, and fill it up with let fresh water displace the salt water there, and then use that as a reserve. So there's been, and of course, the old idea of dragging icebergs to California or other places that need water and let them melt them and so on. I don't know. I don't think this is going to go away. However, this particular plan by Trump is just a little bit too far-fetched, and I don't think that anyone's going to really take it too seriously. I think it's just right along the lines of his buying Greenland. If you remember that one, he wanted to buy Greenland.
And, but again, to some extent, if you bought Greenland, basically, probably what he was wanting to do is actually turn much of the water coming off of the icebergs as they break up into usable water, and pipe it off to the US. Again, another pipe dream.
Yeah, pipe dream is a good one for that. Yeah, it's not an opiate; it's both. Like it's a figuratively opium pipe dream, and the pipe dream cannot happen. But you know what? I'll tell you this: that when I worked in Libya, they made the world's largest man-made river, because deep, deep, deep into the Sahara, Libyan Sahara, where I was, 1,200 feet below us. There was desolation everywhere on the surface. We were in a sand desert, and there was nothing you could live. It was just there.
Yeah.
You had the odd oasis popping up here and there. But underneath us was 1,200 feet underneath us was as much sweet water that could fill Lake Superior. And Gaddafi's regime stopped trying to use the water in place and decided to pump it all the way to the coastal areas where people needed it. That's where the populations were. As far as I know, it's still working. Well, it was working before the Civil War, so it's and you didn't hear it much over here because it was an engineering marvel by a dictatorial government. But I think it was Brown and Root was the engineers. I remember talking to them when I was in Benghazi.
That's the sort of thing that Brown and Root would do. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I remember drinking a bunch of booze with the Brown and Root engineers in Benghazi. And anyway, it went ahead, and so you have this huge pipeline that comes from where South Sarir, where I was, to right to the coast. And to give you an idea how far that is away, you have to drive at about 70 or 80 miles an hour for about at least 5 hours straight north to get to the coastal areas. And then another couple hours before you can get to Benghazi from there. So that's a long way away.
Yeah,
that's my point.
Well, Libya is one of Africa's largest countries, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the fourth largest. There would be Argentina. Oh, I don't know. I don't know how biggest in population is Nigeria. South Africa is a fair size.
Yeah.
The two Sudans are pretty big still. I think Algeria is the biggest in the African continent right now.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I don't know how viable this is, but I do know that they have a desperate water shortage in California or parts of Southern California.
Well, I'll tell you why they do. And I was there visiting my uncles and aunts one time. They have the people of California consume enormous amounts of water for their gardens. And I'm not kidding you. You'd think I'd be joking about this, but no. They live on these really nice hills. I was in Laguna Niguel, and there's very nice hills, and they're lush and full of vegetation, and they have roads with dividers, like divided roads, and they have these huge gardens in the middles, and everybody has these wonderful gardens and everything. But if you look across the highway, you'll see the same shaped hills, but they're completely desolate. Yeah. Because it's a desert area. It's a desert. So what they do is they pump up all kinds of water, and so that they can use them in their gardens and their neighborhoods to make them look gorgeous. Right. Like the whole town was like that, but it relied on water that the town didn't have.
Yeah.
In the meantime, the irrigation required for California agriculture, which is one of the richest in the world, it takes a lot, and you have this constant conflict between people who have money who want water and they don't want restrictions, and they always say the same thing: we want our gardens and we want our agriculture too. Bring some water from Canada.
Well, here you go. Mike's got the answer. We sell them the fresh water from the Welland River. They can have that.
Right? I thought Mike might have thought of that.
Right. Between Trump and Putin, they will divide Canada. The US has fracked all their fresh water away. Right.
The fact of the matter is the United States has a lot of its own water.
It does.
And it can it can divert waters. It already has done diverted waters and so on. The Mississippi is a huge watershed. Other river systems are. They have enough of their own water. They don't need ours. So if they want to do something like that, they can. And look what they've done to the Colorado River. That is like at where the Colorado River was. There was a mighty river entering into the sea. There's just mud and a little dribble here and there. So they've diverted almost all the water from the Colorado River up. They killed the river, really. So there's a kind of a lesson of what can happen. You can destroy a whole ecosystem depending on how greedy for water you are.
Okay, Karen's basically said, "Hey, Lake Michigan is mostly in the U.S. In fact, it's actually wholly in the U.S., I believe,
Yes, it is.
and that they should dam it off, and that should give them their fresh water."
Yes, you can see all this. I think that just personally, I think they should take the Mackenzie River, put a big U-turn in it, and send it down to the States. That ought to do it.
Well, here's the one that actually is also problematic and has been seen as a problem for quite some time. Is this thing by Mike, and it's easy to say, but could be potentially devastating. A huge earthquake across that fault line could well be basically separating California and California, Vancouver very soon, almost any time.
I don't think so. I don't think anything of that magnitude is on the books. What you have, there's always that idea of a San Andreas fault and so on, and there is a division going on there, but I don't think it will happen.
That's what creates the Baja California peninsula there. That basically is the movement of the San Andreas fault southbound from that point. But again, it's been like that for millions of years, and I don't necessarily think that it's going to be splitting off from the US anytime soon.
Well, you're going to have what happens is a very typical subduction in event where you have one plate pushed under the other, and others are shifting.
It's not. It's a sliding event where basically you've got the Pacific plate sliding and rotating against the American plate. It's not.
Yeah, but
we don't have massive trenches on the west coast of the United States, on the west coast of Canada. We don't have massive trenches. What is happening is that is not a subduction event, it's a sliding event. So the San Andreas fault is sliding along, which is what's creating Baja California.
Yeah, but it only slides at inches at a time.
Yes.
And you'll have earthquakes, but you won't have massive ones. If you want an event that will be that is possible, that would be massive destroying, is the caldera in Yellowstone Park. But
that is more likely to be that massive event that would destroy that part of America. In fact, if that blows, apparently we're all gone.
But you do have the continent subduction going on anyway. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the Rocky Mountains. These plates are shifting. They're shifting back and forth, and they're going one under the other, and who knows what's going to happen. But from what I can understand, the fear of this massive earthquakes that take off, like apparently California can fall right off on this San Andreas fault. I think pretty much all that is being buried now. It's the fears of that have gone away.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's so much of a problem, but I don't know. I don't like. They're going to need water. They haven't. One thing they haven't really explored well enough, and they should. If they really need that much water, they have a sea right there, a massive ocean. If they can take the salt out of it, they'll have
They
enough water.
They actually do that in San Diego. They have they have desalination plants, but apparently it only operates for about 60% of the population at the
Yeah,
moment.
and that's the future for these areas. Basically, is desalination plants, and you have to be.
When you think about this, is that I lived for a year or so in Saudi Arabia, and in Saudi Arabia, the places like Riyadh, which is where I was staying, in the middle of the desert, they rely solely upon desalination plants in places like in ports like Dammam, for basically desalinating the water in the Arabian Sea and making that available to the capital city, Riyadh, in the center of Saudi Arabia. And that desalination goes on for a population of somewhere near 6 million. That desalination goes on, supports a population 7 days a week.
Is it from the Arabian Sea or is it from the Red Sea?
From the Arabian Sea.
Oh, okay, the other side. Okay, yeah, okay. So well, there's a country that's had to have a needed water for a very long time and don't have a whole lot of it themselves. So
yeah,
anyway, Trump's ideas are just. I mean, he thought this was a really good idea, and I suppose his idea of buying Greenland was a really good idea too. The idea is okay, but practicality is no good. He's just all over the place. He'll say anything basically. He'll just say anything, and I think that the fact that nothing sticks on this guy, that the credibility of everything he says like is like very small sometimes. But he's the guy that's able to say it, and nobody calls him up on it.
Yeah. Karen makes the point that her eaves troughs are directed to her front garden and she hasn't watered it in 10 years. I also know this gentleman when I lived in one place I lived in England, this gentleman there actually had he had basically things he could turn on in his house, and he could utilize the bath water to actually water his garden. Right?
Yeah, there are things like that. There was well, we can go into that, but we're diverting our focus here. Yeah, there's a lot of water in the United States, and if they manage the water better, but they want the cake and eat it too. Yeah, they want to have half an hour showers, and they still want the California to be able to have enough water for the grapevines and other agriculture.
There actually is a question. Is there a different way? We use a shower, and it's pretty well common most parts of the Western world. We shower every day. Is there a better way to clean ourselves than showering? And the answer is I don't know. But I hear, but there must be another way, I wonder.
Well, you could do like the Greeks used to do. You can coat yourself in olive oil and scrape it off with a knife. That's what they did. I'm not so sure you want to do that.
No, I don't have the time to do that. And besides which, I need a servant to do that, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that sounds real good, Peter. I'm looking for a servant that will coat me in oil and scrape it off.
Yeah. Well, after all, you can't get to everywhere on your own body, can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's all amount of hygiene. That's all I'm saying here.
Yeah. So you know, and the Greek olive oil won't get very far with a 9 billion world population, will it?
Yeah, or you could just go out to any brick wall and get naked and start scraping yourself and hope that
Yeah.
all the dirt falls off.
Well, actually, there was a thing. Somebody talked about sandbars one time. There's a thing in the desert that I heard about. Is that actually that's what they used to do? Is because you're supposed to actually wash yourself to pray in Islam. What they've
Yeah.
done in the desert is you can actually use the sand as a method of cleaning yourself, and sand ablutions are actually permitted in terms of washing yourself in order to pray.
I wonder what salesman brought that on. Oh, hey, here, I got this box of sand. It's better than water. It's like selling refrigerators to Eskimos. Here, let me sell you this box of sand.
The trouble is,
you can wash with it.
Yeah, we couldn't use sand here.
Yeah, well, basically, the one other thing I heard of, and I don't know if this is anywhere viable these days, it's kind of like an ultrasonic shower where
I've heard of them as well.
Yeah, and I don't know how effective they are or what actually they do, and I don't know. But anyway, what else we got, Peter?
Yeah, okay. So Stelco shareholders have voted in favor of a takeover by a US steelmaking giant. What was their name?
Cleveland Cliffs.
Cleveland Cliffs. Yeah, that's it. I got the wrong article. That's why I couldn't come up with a name, because I clicked on the article and the name wasn't there in front of me. When I clicked on the right article, it was right there in front of me. Cleveland Cliffs. Yeah. So basically, you know, hey, hasn't Stelco been sold a dozen times? If you know, I'm not knowledgeable in the steel industry, but it seems to me that I think that there's been about 3 or 4 names on that plant since I've been living in the Niagara region.
Yeah, well, it was Stelco, of course, forever, and then it changed to U.S. Steel. It was U.S. Steel for a while, and then it was sold to, and it was called Stelco again, and I don't know who bought it at that time. And now Cleveland Cliffs wants it. The stockholders say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. It has to go through some sort of regulatory process.
Yeah.
Oh, my buddies, the skunks ripped them off. I can smell it coming into the, oh, God.
Yeah. So basically it gained universal support from most Stelco shareholders who voted this in on Monday. But as you said, that then with it, Stelco and the United Steelworkers Union in Canada, it predict the outcome to be a stronger plant, but it's still awaiting, of course. It's still awaiting a kind of approval, right?
Yeah, I just dropped my.
What's going on? He lost him again. And this time he was skunked out of existence. I don't know. This is actually embarrassing. You know. Okay. Yeah. Going back to the last story, Karen basically says Star Trek uses sonic showers, face red smiling live. Yeah. Yeah, some form of sonic showers. That's a concept that has been around for a while. Okay, so to me, what has happened with Stelco is it seems that is forever changing landscape of Hamilton. We've had new names on that. You know, we've had new names almost every 2 years. There's a brand new name up on the Stelco building, and you know, and I don't really know what the history is of the steelworks, but I do know, for example, when we've had it with in my own industry, in the IT industry, I used to know everybody who was taking over who, or who was rumored to be taking over who else, and it was an important thing to know about, because if one company was taking over another company, and the company you utilized had one of those companies' software, it might impact you, right? It might impact how you were using, what software you would be using in the future. So I always used to keep an eye on it, but Dave was basically telling me before the show that he kept an eye on. He used to keep an eye on this because obviously he was involved in it, and I'd have loved his insight into this. But basically, Stelco have voted in favor of selling the Hamilton-based steelmaker to Cleveland Cliffs for about $3.8 billion, right? But it won't happen without a thumbs up from the Canadian government, who have an ongoing review process for any proposed foreign takeover of corporations like this. All right. Okay. So moving on. Lebanon. Blasts have killed several people and wounded thousands. Hey there. Okay.
This time I dropped my phone and I lost connection because I dropped it. A hell of a bad time today.
Yeah, you are having a bad time. Okay, so I was just, before we move on, any final thoughts about Stelco takeover?
The only thing I really care about is the guys that work there. And I'm afraid that when you get these big conglomerates, they like to mothball some kind of operations. It says here, Wells noticed that he heard similar promises from U.S. Steel when it bought Stelco in 2000, only later to shrink the workforce and mothball the Hamilton operations of the last blast furnace. So remember, Hamilton does not have a blast furnace. The Stelco Lake Erie Works is the place where they get the steel where they can roll it in Hamilton, and they have the Z line there also in Hamilton. So they don't even have a blast furnace there anymore. At one time they had D and E furnace going, and then they mothballed one and they mothballed the other. That's not a good sign when you have a steel plant and you don't have a blast furnace.
Yeah. I would have thought that they would both go together.
They do, but they're luckily they rely on Lake Erie Works for their steel, and so the Lake Erie Works has the blast furnace. It's supposed to have had two blast furnaces, and in a world where steel is still very essential, and just about anybody can make steel because the Bessemer process is over 200 years old, basically.
Yeah.
And so that is the most simple. That is one of the earliest forms of earliest advances in the Industrial Revolution that happened in Britain with the Bessemer process and other steelmaking processes, and that is universal technology all over the world. I mean, it's involved. It takes big machines and big vessels and lots of power, but anybody can do it.
Yeah, it doesn't require high-tech solutions to make it happen.
Yeah, we don't really want to be locked into a place where we have to buy steel from someone else. And we found that the Japanese, the Germans, and just about everybody under the sun were dumping steel. And we had an arrangement with the United States, and it took 4 years under Bush, under the free trade. They said that we were dumping steel or subsidizing our steel here because we could make it cheaper than they could down there. Of course it can, because our dollar's lower. And they put a prohibition on our steel for 4 years so it would go through the courts. Well, of course,
when it went through the courts, nothing was wrong with the agreement. Nothing was wrong with the steel that we made. It wasn't subsidized, as they had said. But Bush had to put a slowdown on the steel making there in order to get the support of steel workers and steel industry in the States. He was able to slow down the process of Canadian steel going into the States. So there's a lot of stuff complicated behind the scenes here. And when you get a big U.S. company and it says, okay, well, up north, the benefits are a little bit too good. The wages are a little bit too good. The pension plan's a little bit too good. So you know what? Maybe what we'll do here is just kind of mothball the rest of Stelco and make our steel down here.
Yeah.
That could be a process of monopolization.
That always is one of the factors in any takeover is actually take it over and mothball the plant, because you take over your competitor to put them out of existence, basically.
Yeah. Now, when they did mothball the blast furnace and stuff, there was a time there where Stelco, whether it was under U.S. Steel or Stelco, didn't look like their future was very good at all. However, they've continued operations all this time. I had a friend here, actually, a friend of mine came over last night, and he worked there for 30 years. So maybe, over 30 years. And right from the very beginning of shortly after he worked there, he began to work there, there was always this overarching idea that they might close whatever's left of Stelco. There's less and less there being done, and so on and so forth. And it looked like they were to close it up 2, 3, 4 times, but it never happened. They ended up putting the Z line there, which is a zinc coating, pretty much galvanization, I think what it is.
Yeah.
So the Z line, and so they would roll steel and then put the zinc coating on it. I think it had something to do with that. It's left me now. So they are operating and stuff, and they are doing things there. My problem is there are 600 Stelco employees at that Hamilton Bayfront plant.
Yeah,
that is essential to the economy. And the United Steelworkers Local 1005. Let me tell you, I would be very wary of this acquisition myself. And
yeah, well, I would as well, because typically you take over a competitor because you're looking at closing them down, or you're expanding your operations. And at the current time, I don't know that as many people are expanding operations.
Well, steel is ubiquitous; it comes from everywhere. And when a country like Japan or Korea or China, or even the established ones like Germany, they find that they have excess steel capacity.
Yeah.
In order to keep those steel mills going and making a profit off it, they dump the steel outside their country.
Yeah, of course.
And they make some pretty damn good steel, because when I worked at the UNO mill and the Welland Pipe in Welland there, we were getting plate steel, which is what pipe is made out of. Plate steel from Germany, and at a different time from Japan when Stelco was actually on strike, and the steel is super good steel. They were dumping really high quality steel. I mean, they were getting more than they paid for, but that's what they can do if they have that. And
yeah,
that's a big problem. Steel is easily made, basically, in an industrial country.
Okay. Moving on, because where I was about to get to, but you came back in time. Lebanon blasts have killed several people and wounded thousands, according to this article by the CBC. So they're basically talking about pager explosions in Lebanon. I thought pagers were a thing of the past, but anyway.
Well, there's a good reason for this. That's the first thing that comes to everybody's minds. They're using pagers. Hezbollah's using pagers. Well, they went to pagers because the Israeli intelligence had could follow and trace them. The Israeli intelligence has been able to pull off some real coups. They've been able to find the most protected people in Hezbollah and Hamas, and execute them with assassinations. These people are supposed to be the most protected there are. They were able to disrupt missile attacks and stuff that they had planned because the Israelis knew that it was going to happen. So what Hezbollah did was it decided that all its carriers and anybody else that wanted one would go to pagers instead of cell phones, a simpler technology that's not easy to hack into like phone lines are, phone connections. So they did this, and they ordered them, and they came in, I think through a Korean company, but I'm not quite sure, or Taiwanese company, and it went through I think Iran. But it appears that the Israelis were able to get to these pagers and either install an explosive device in them somehow, or were able to, like, there's two theories here. They were able to heat them all up at the same time, so they exploded. But people say they wouldn't have exploded as bad as all that unless something else was added to them. Somewhere in the process, it appears that Israel's got, I mean, the plans for this were insane. Like, the intelligence required to do this was huge.
And the interesting thing is about this is, you're right, by going to low tech, with people, basically the cause about a pager is you pick up a landline and make a call. All right. So those calls are, well, all calls are traceable, but it's a lot less. With a cell phone, you're following Dave around, you're following the Hezbollah commander around, so you can trace not only where they are, but you can trace everything that they say. Whereas with with picking up a landline and making a call to a specific number, which is given on a pager, you have to know where the person is in order to make that trace in the first place.
Yeah. So and Hezbollah was running the pages. So the implication here is that what Israel is saying to Hezbollah. Now, I don't know if they did this all on their own, or they were heavily. I mean, the technology and this and the stealth that got them the information they need, they probably relied on a lot of U.S. help on this one, but they have a lot of incredible capabilities on their own. And the message they've said to Hezbollah is, we can find you anyway, anytime we want. We can, we know what you're doing. There's no hiding from us. We just took all your pages and blew them up. Well, what they did there is they injured thousands, a couple thousand people. They killed 8, I guess, including one little girl was killed. But they don't care about that. They don't care how many people they kill. But but the message was very clear. You can't run, you can't hide. We know where you are. We can find you.
Oh yeah, yeah, clearly, yeah. And whether you're using outdated technology or new technology, exactly that. They might not be able to know what's being said through phone lines, but the fact is that if they're managing to get at pagers and blow them up, that's quite a significant coup.
Well, they haven't advanced that technology down to the Houthis, because they were able to shoot that missile into Israel the other day. But a major missile attack was disrupted by the Israelis from Lebanon. The missile attack, and it relied on intelligence. So they're all set and ready to go for a missile attack, and the Israelis were able to bomb the snot out of the place, and it didn't happen. And Hezbollah is thinking, how the hell did they know that? How the hell did they were able to find this out? Well, their intelligence is very porous, and there's a number of different reasons for that. Number one, they have spies but people on the ground that are working for them. So there are Palestinians or Lebanese that work for the Israeli intelligence because of money or because of threats. They'll take a person and threaten their family. They'll threaten them and their family and everything else, and combine it sometimes with monetary awards. Now, you work for us, or something's going to happen to your family. That kind of thing. You know what? If you do, here's some money for you. We can get your all kinds of coercion like that, and they've been pretty successful with that among the Palestinians, because basically, what are you going to do if the Israelis knock on the door one day? You're going to work for us, or guess what? Your sister and your brother. Well, so there's come some kind of accident happening, or well, you know what? We could knock this house down, but you know what? If you work for us, we won't. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they have all kinds of operatives all over. Remember, they've done bold assassinations right in the middle of Tehran, where they've come up to nuclear scientists and just shot them to pieces. And these are protected people, so their intelligence network is vast. And I think this really thrown Iran and Hezbollah off big time, because they don't know if they set up to shoot a rocket back at Israel, Israel knows about it ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Essentially, that's the point about that, is that I suppose that the Israelis, Mossad, are just capable of. They know a lot of stuff. They've they've got a lot of intelligence sources, and I guess that's been the consistent issue with a lot of people, which is one of the reasons Hezbollah has been the thorn in the side of the Israelis for quite some time.
Yeah, but Israel's are masters of divide and conquer.
Yeah,
They supported Hamas, so they can have Hamas versus the Palestinian Authority, and so they make sure that they don't get united. They can use Hamas versus Hezbollah versus all the other little. Remember, there's dozens of these little. It seems anyway. There's in Hamas itself. There are in Gaza. There's just not Hamas. I think there's 7 other Islamic units, and they can use one. Yeah, you can use one against the other. They can use one versus the other. To get foment between them, so they can have them struggle against one another. So divide and conquer, set one off against the other. So that might be a source of some of their collaborators. And I don't know. They're pretty good at it. Right. They've been. They learned a lot of their early techniques from the Brits.
Of course. Yeah. All right, I'm going to have to get going anyway, because I've got a hearing this morning.
Okay. I hope you hear well. And anyways, sorry about the connection problems, everyone. And without further ado, I bid you adieu. And let's hope that whole mess doesn't escalate, pagers and all, in the Middle East. Anyway.